Coming up tonight, PMH wards closed due to COVID-19. Meanwhile, heavy rain and flooding expected this weekend. And the Christian Council expressing shock by the new orders.
Our news is brought to you by Alive.
Welcome to our news and thanks for joining us. I'm Jared Higgs. Topping news tonight, some 50 patients were potentially exposed to COVID-19 across 3 wards at Princess Margaret Hospital in the last week, according to the Nassau Guardian. The exposure has prompted the closure of a few wards, and some healthcare professionals were reportedly sent into quarantine. It's a major concern for doctors and nurses. Cal Joaquin reports.
Just over 2 months after dozens of healthcare professionals found themselves in quarantine after being potentially exposed, more have been placed in 14-day isolation again. According to the Nassau Guardian, the male surgical ward, neither the female medical ward are accepting new admissions. A source within the hospital revealed that patients were potentially exposed by a healthcare worker after an elderly woman tested positive for the virus over the weekend. According to Bahamas Nurses Union President Amanda Williams, between 24 to 50 nurses were potentially exposed on the wards.
Right now, some of them are quarantined according to the exposure, and this is done by employee health. All right. So according to the exposure, and some are still working with the same set of patients that they have always been working with.
But with nurses now being placed in quarantine, so are doctors, including some interns who have only been on the job for a few weeks. CPSA President Dr. Sabrika Pinder-Butler says while doctors do all they must to protect themselves, there is always a certain level of concern among them.
Certainly there is a significant concern, because if the physicians and nurses and the staff complement is not there to provide the care that's needed, then we know that the disservice to the patient certainly would occur, and then the disservice to the healthcare workers as well.
And as the COVID numbers skyrocket, the CPSA president says doctors are watching the new numbers of those hospitalized. She says that's an even bigger concern for them, as the public healthcare system has limited capacity.
Now, with what we're seeing with increases in the numbers, and we know that we already have challenges within the institution with bed space and exposures potentially to staff as well as patients, it is a concern for us, a very, very real concern that we won't be able to have the capacity to properly care for patients, to house them.
Now, as for the measures being taken by the government to prevent a further spread of COVID-19, the CPSA president says she feels they can go a bit further. With Grand Bahama still on a 2-week lockdown and the rest of the country on weekend lockdowns, we asked Pinder-Butler if that's enough. She pointed to the country's borders.
That's a concern, because certainly if we're putting restrictive measures in place, but then we still have a lot of them that are open without other things being put in place, it makes us wonder if we're really going to be as effective as we can with trying to curb these cases. So borders are still open to persons being able to travel. That's a concern, especially with these numbers.
We reached out to the Public Hospitals Authority. However, they offered no comment. For Our News, I'm Kyle Joaquin.
Bahamas Public Services Union President Kingsley Ferguson is hitting out at government after his members at PMH and the Attorney General's office were potentially exposed to COVID-19. Ferguson said the union should not have to find out about these matters through the media. Berthany McDermott has that.
Bahamas Public Services Union President Kingsley Ferguson giving the government an F grade for its handling of the COVID-19 pandemic, as he said he found out in the media that roughly 50 patients were potentially exposed to COVID-19 across 3 of PMH's wards.
There are a number of areas where the government would get an F, particularly in the return to work policy, particularly in the offices where there should be rotation and there is none.
Calls made to Health Minister Renwood Wells were not returned up to news time. When pressed on the matter, officials from the Public Hospitals Authority declined to comment. But late this afternoon, they did release a statement announcing plans to tighten up PMH's protocols during the second wave of COVID-19. Specialty clinics and elective surgeries have been suspended until further notice, and only emergency cases will be managed at this time. Additionally, visitation remains suspended. Ferguson said they reached out to hospital officials, but the response was very disappointing.
The healthcare professionals are not grabbing the bull by the horn and informing the union of what is happening in that organization so that we can advise our members and have them to take the precautions that is necessary in order to safeguard themselves and their families.
Ferguson also took aim at officials at the Attorney General's office after it was revealed that an employee at the Attorney General's office tested positive for COVID-19. Attorney General Carl Bethel said while the employee was not in the office in the past 14 days, the building still underwent a deep cleaning and all employees who would have been in contact with that person were asked to remain in isolation at home.
I would have visited a particular area, and I'm gonna say it this way: you have to turn sideways to pass the next employee. And so if that is the case, that suggests that that particular department should be placed on a rotation. And I visited a number of government departments where it's almost impossible for persons to maintain social distancing from cubicle to cubicle.
Ferguson didn't stop there. He said what was most disappointing was the way the union had to find out about this matter.
We're asking that the union be informed that something has happened and what is being done to address the concern. I would have had the very distasteful experience of speaking to the permanent secretary over at the Attorney General's office, who suggested to me that I look in the media for what they would have done.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Berthany McDermott.
The Ministry of Health confirmed 37 additional cases of COVID-19 today. That's 102 new cases in just 2 days. This brings the total number of confirmed cases to 484. A 14-year-old girl, a 16-year-old girl, and a 17-year-old boy are among the 32 new cases confirmed on Grand Bahama today. The island now has 243 cases of COVID-19. The other 5 persons who tested positive today are in New Providence. 16 people are in hospital. The system that is expected to grow in intensity and become Tropical Storm Isaias will dump heavy rainfall and likely cause flooding when it impacts the Bahamas by this weekend. While officials are hoping the storm weakens before then, they're also quickly preparing and readying local shelters where they say social distancing protocols will be strictly enforced in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. Jasmine Brown reports.
With the massive system inching even closer to the Bahamas, NEMA officials say they're keeping a watchful eye, and they insisted residents should do the same.
That we are all NEMA. So when people ask, what is NEMA doing to prepare for the hurricane season? You need to ask yourself. Check yourself first, because the first line of defense is you preparing for the season.
That's Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Disaster Preparedness Carl Smith warning all residents to remain vigilant as the tropical disturbance makes its way towards the Bahamas. Weather officials reveal that the storm's latest track predicted the system would move further south of the Bahamas. It's prompted officials to place islands in the southern Bahamas under a tropical storm watch before midday on Wednesday. Still, Bahamas Department of Meteorology Director Trevor Basden said the rapid-moving system is expected to bring heavy rain.
Look at that. Okay, all of that red and orange, and especially the white, that's the very high top. A lot of activity going on there. So you can see how extensive the weather pattern is. So as it passes towards or steers towards us in a west-northwesterly direction, you can expect localized flooding. So we're looking at rainfall amounts 1 to 3 inches, but some accumulations in pockets 6 to 8 inches.
Basden added that local weather officials are hoping that the system will break apart as it goes over neighboring countries with mountainous terrain. Still, he warned Bahamians to be prepared as there is a slim possibility the system could develop into a Category 1 or 2 storm, though he says that is improbable. NEMA Director Captain Stephen Russell said shelters are being prepared and are expected to be opened as early as Thursday in the southern Bahamas. As it relates to social distancing at shelters given the rapid rise of COVID-19 cases, Director of the Department of Social Services Lillian Quant Forbes insisted measures are being taken to ensure shelters are as safe as possible.
What we've had to do is identify the schools which have smaller classrooms rather than having a large amount of persons in the various gymnasiums of the schools. And so with the classrooms, then it means that we have to limit the amount of persons in each classroom.
Quant Forbes added that there will also be medical staff stationed at shelters as an extra precaution. Reporting for Our News, I'm Jasmine Brown.
Thanks, Jasmine. Well, the fiancé of a man who was gunned down by police last week is outraged over his death. The woman says her children were at the center of the man's life.
He was someone's son. That's someone's child. He was a father to my kids. If it was your father or your son, you would have cared.
24-year-old Deshauna Claire is heartbroken and angry over the death of her fiancé, 31-year-old Jamal Frazier Bodie.
It was wrong what they did, and I do not want them to get away with it.
Frazier Bodie was gunned down by police last Friday night on Windsor Park after officers say he pulled a gun on them.
He walked out the door and said he coming back, and he never came back. And it was hurtful to know that. I tried to call his phone over and over and over.
Claire is left to raise the couple's 2 children, ages 9 and 6, on her own.
He will always help them with their homework. He wouldn't miss a day from picking them up for school. They love him so very much. They love him dearly.
Frazier Bodie's killing drew criticism after police waited nearly 3 days to inform media of the incident that led to his death. Clara says that is unacceptable. She was also adamant that her companion of 9 years did not own a gun.
No, he does not own a firearm. He does not own a firearm. He will do anything to support the kids. He went out there for a job application.
The police version of events paint a picture of Frazier Bodie as a dangerous individual. However, Clara says he was a man who was committed to holding down steady employment.
He was not a bad person. He was a father to my kids. He loved them. He loved them. He would not do anything to cause them hurt and harm. He wanted to see them every day, on the hour, every hour. If whatever he could try to do, he would do. The little that he have, he would do. If you have to walk from here and make sure they eat, he would do.
Clara says she dreads going back to her job near the hospital's blood bank and morgue. She says it will cause her pain knowing the man she loves is there.
He wasn't just like a fiancé or a boyfriend. He was like a brother to me.
National Insurance Board payments to unemployed Bahamians have topped $80 million. That's according to Dr. Nicola Virgil Roll, who allayed fears that NIB can't handle those payouts. Julian Gray reports.
NIB has paid close to 35,000 people who have been left jobless due to the coronavirus pandemic, according to Director Nicola Virgil Roll.
We have to date paid out just over 35,000 individuals, contributors to the NIB fund, to the tune of just over $80 million. That consists of up to 13 weeks of unemployment benefit, which results in about an average about $180 to $200 per week in terms of average benefit payments.
Added to that $80 million payout is a $15.5 million disbursement to about 7,000 self-employed persons, particularly in the tourism industry. Dr. Virgil Roll said those affected by Dorian, self-employed persons in the tourism sector, or those who have exhausted their claim are all eligible for the extended payment of about $150 per week. She added that about $8.7 million has been paid out from that program, which equates to about 17,000 of the 34,000 people enrolled. Some, she said, did not get payments because they did not complete the verification process.
Things had to change because of the social and physical distancing requirements, but that process was still required in terms of some notification that you remain unemployed. And so we did have several thousand, I think it was about 7,000 or so claims in our V3 system that were stalled because of non-verification. That's required at the every 4-week point.
NIB has also been reaching out to employers to see if workers have returned. Some employers with outstanding payments have come in voluntarily. She also shot down fears that the payments may cause NIB to go bankrupt and stressed that NIB has $1.7 billion in reserves.
The reserve is for exactly times like this.
Reporting for our News, I'm Jillian Gray.
Still to come, a government official's strong message to illegal migrants. Plus, bus drivers protest following a failed meeting with a new transport minister. Stay tuned. As the hurricane season becomes more active, a top disaster preparedness official is calling on illegal migrants, particularly those who live in compromised structures, to return home. Jasmine Brown reports.
Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Disaster Preparedness Management and Reconstruction, Carl Smith, called for a permanent solution to shanty towns.
We have a situation in the Bahamas where we have a number of migrants who live in conditions that cannot withstand systems such as hurricanes. We saw that with Hurricane Dorian and the consequential disaster that followed. We have to come to the place and realize that that situation has to be addressed.
Smith was responding to a question related to an International Organization for Migration report that pointed to the inadequacies of shelters in the Bahamas. He noted that the Bahamas doesn't currently have any purposely built facilities that serve as shelters. However, he said the government plans to construct multi-purpose facilities in the future. Still, he said the IOM ought to consider the country's migrant population and living conditions.
Part of our preparation needs to be that if you are in the Bahamas illegally, you should make every effort to go home. We are a very humane society. We provide water and food and shelter, but there's only so much that we can do.
Smith also pointed to the destruction of major shanty towns in Abaco following Hurricane Dorian as he sought to drive his point home.
Just as we've had an illegal migrant population in the heart of Marsh Harbor, Abaco, that resulted in quite a number of lives being lost. We have such communities here in New Providence, in Eleuthera, in Andros, and many of our own people are facilitating them being here under those conditions. So when the hurricane season comes, and the question goes out, what is NEMA doing about it? We need to check ourselves. What are we doing about it?
Reporting for R News, I'm Jasmine Brown.
Thanks again, Jasmine. After meeting with government officials on Friday, Bahamas Christian Council President Bishop Delton Fernandez said it was a terrible shock when Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis announced new restrictions later that day. He said one of the challenges church leaders have is being dictated to and not consulted. Giorgio Bain reports.
Despite warning pastors to adhere to the emergency orders, Fernandez said he was taken aback by the new orders because religious leaders met with the competent authority that very day and received no warning of what was to come.
We were first of all taken aback because we were called to a meeting on Friday, informational meeting, and one of the challenges we have, if it's not a conversation, it then becomes talking to us. And we would have said that we had funerals and weddings and the like planned for the weekend, and being given information on a Friday doesn't lend itself to us getting the information out to pastors, getting the information out to churches. So it was a terrible shock.
Fernandez shared his feelings about limiting those attending funerals to 5 people.
It lacks the planning that is necessary because, unfortunately, I'm in that category. I'm burying my father Friday. And I'm in the 5 that is family and officiant. I don't know why we would do that. And not give the capacity to have a reasonable, decent wedding and a reasonable, decent funeral. These are things that move beyond just orders, but they move to humanity.
He added that these orders will move persons to a place of anger and hostility.
That there is a sense of anger, of trauma, of moving you to a place where there seems to be a lack of concern. And now, that has to be executed in the wind because you don't know what's coming next.
Christian Council President Bishop Delton Fernandez is questioning the motive behind the decision of some pastors who have come out against new restrictions and declared that their church doors will remain open. On Friday, the government announced that churches can hold virtual services while funerals and weddings are limited to 5 people.
Why would you put your member in that kind of challenge? That they might be in violation of the order and find himself on the other side of the law. Unless that pastor is willing to pay those fees, I wouldn't put any congregant in that manner. The best way to fight that battle is to reasonably move us to where the numbers are in a controllable area, and then make sure that we stay on the authorities, that we can now transition to the protocols we've put in place.
Reporting for our news, I'm Giorgio Bain.
Thanks, Giorgio. Well, out-of-work bus drivers gathered at R.M. Bailey Park this afternoon after a meeting with newly appointed Minister of Transport Dion Folks didn't go so well. Bus drivers are advocating for the emergency order prohibiting bus drivers from operating to be reversed. Driver Stephen Sands says the government owes them an apology.
Mr. Prime Minister, Mr. Minister of Transport, all of you all owe the bus transportation members an apology, because you all came out and sent the police on the road who don't know how to respect bus drivers for some reason down the other. I'm not saying they can't do their job, but they must show us respect because we are men. We are men with great curiosity in our life.
Bus drivers are calling on government to consult with them to come up with a way that would allow them to continue to make a living. They said it is unacceptable, especially after they took the necessary precautions to resume operations.
Well, they're giving some assistance, but like all other guys saying that ain't cutting it. You know?
It's very, very hard because due to the fact that I was home from March to now, and then they allowed me to come back on the road. I did the proper procedures and went the proper route to get my bus license and what have you. If I had known that I was going to get put off the road, I would have saved that money, because that money could have come in handy.
Still to come, Bahamians prepare for the upcoming weekend lockdowns. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Bahamians are getting prepared for back-to-back weekend lockdowns. The first begins Friday at 7 p.m. and runs through the August Monday holiday, ending Tuesday at 5 a.m. The second runs from Friday, August 7th at 7 p.m. to the following Monday at 5 a.m.
I have no difficulties with it because with the lockdown it would be preventing us from getting the virus.
But I'm normally home anyway, so it doesn't make a difference, but I'm for it.
Personally, I have no issues with it. I think we need to take whatever necessary step that will be deemed necessary to help curb this pandemic.
During the lockdowns, exercise is permitted within the confines of an individual's yard only, and fast food restaurants will be closed. Residents are to only leave their homes for a run to the grocery store, pharmacy, or a gas station. Religious services may be held virtually. Live streaming is permitted between 7 a.m. and 1 p.m. on Saturday and Sunday, with no more than 10 people participating from the facility.
Well, I think the lockdown, according to the Prime Minister, I think he's using the best wisdom of health care for the Bahamian people. And sometimes, like say, some decisions have to be tough, but it's good for the Bahamas, for the people.
Still to come, basketball fans rejoice. Find out more after this. The return of the NBA gives Rev customers a unique opportunity to catch all the action. Marcellus Hall has that.
With the NBA restart scheduled for tomorrow, we'll have two Bahamians trying to make their way into the playoffs, DeAndre Ayton and Buddy Hield. Give you a chance to watch all those games courtesy of Rev. Both Buddy Hield and DeAndre Ayton wrapping up their final scrimmage games prior to the NBA restart on Thursday. Buddy and the Kings against the Clippers, where he would score 17 points with 8 rebounds in a 106-102 win. And Ayton against the Raptors, where he finished with 7 points and 6 rebounds, also in a win 117-106. Now, as the season starts, Rev offering customers an opportunity to catch all the action.
It's an exciting time in the Bombers, man. It's an exciting time as we celebrate the return of the NBA. And it's simply if you sign up for Trio. Like if you're a double play customer, you can add a voice, you can add an internet. It includes 75 megs of speed. It's unlimited voice. It also allows you to get the RevGo Voice app and the RevGo Play app, which allows you to watch all NBA games via your phone or wherever you are. The return of the NBA, the return of the King, LeBron James, the first game being LA versus LA. You don't want to miss that, And it's NBA League Pass you get for free. So you get to watch all the games on us.
Major stating that the process to get connected, a simple one.
You can actually call 601-2200 and you can just opt in. You can go rev.bs on our website, our new exciting website, and also just opt in. So if you have about 3 of our services, it's free to you as well. So it's no additional cost to get NBA TV and every single game, every single moment of LeBron James. I just got to mention that for all Laker fans out there, Thursday it starts, and it ends in LA, but it's not the Clippers, the Lakers.
So make sure you opt in and be a part of the Rev Trio and not miss a single game courtesy of Rev. Reporting for our news, I'm Marcellus Hall. Thank you for joining us for Our News Tonight. To catch our news on the go, download the RevGo Play app. On behalf of the entire news team, I'm Jared Higgs. Have a beautiful evening, Bahamas.